Hello, everybody. Welcome back. If you have not seen any of my videos, my name is Ashley Gillis. I'm a licensed clinical social worker currently practicing in the state of Utah. I have kind of created these videos for anybody that is kind of looking for skills and therapy education to use. These videos are by no means actual therapy. These videos are simply just education on different therapy modalities and the skills within those modalities. And then some of the videos, like ones today, we kind of step out of the therapy realm a little bit, and we're going to talk about a theory within social work called the stages of development. Some of my other videos on roles and understanding roles, that's also based on a theory called systems theory. And then my videos that are numbered 1 through 13, that's kind of videos that will go in order, that will really dive into some of the different therapy modalities. And now most of my videos are going to start branching out into other modalities and some different theories within social work. So today we're going to dive into the stages of development. If you have not watched my video on the equation, I highly, highly encourage you go do that, because the equation, this is essentially where the equation comes from. So those of you that have watched that video, and I believe it's video number 10, it's labeled number 10, and I believe it's labeled negative core beliefs. That is the video that I discuss what the equation is. For a brief overview before we dive into this, the equation is simply just a set of events that will happen that will lead to consequences per se. So number 1, life kind of begins, your emotions and behaviors kind of begin with what's called a negative core belief system. Then step number 2 is essentially your backpack, which is the emotional turmoil that you possibly are carrying. Then number 3 is when you go into a situation, the core beliefs, step 1 and 2, the core belief in the backpack will kind of dictate the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in relation to that situation that happens. Please go watch that video for more of a deep dive on that before you do this video. If not, it can get a little bit confusing. You don't have to watch the other videos, but by all means, and if you're like, I don't really want to watch the video, but I want just something on the equation, go ahead and email me and I can send you over the worksheet that I have created to kind of put that in perspective a little bit, but I highly encourage you go watch that. This is where all that comes from. So when I do individual therapy with people and we get through we identify the core belief system and we identify the backpack and we've identified their errors in their emotional and behavioral processes, a lot of the times I get the question, why? Like, where does this come from? Right? Okay, we've identified this. I've learned the skills to dismantle it, but why did all of this happen? Where did this whole belief system essentially get engraved? And it comes from the stages of development. So that is why I would like to dive into this today. Again, this video, with all of my videos, is all educational. This is by no means meant to replace therapy. If you are looking for actual one-on-one therapy, that is available. I do one-on-one sessions. You can either book that via email at utlcsw@gmail.com, or you can go ahead and go to my website. All of that is in my my bio on YouTube, and feel free to email me and I can get you connected if you want more of a one-on-one after seeing this video, because it is a lot. Okay. Also, before we dive in, I have recently got some dental work done. So there's going to be some times where my voice kind of sounds a little bit funny. I apologize for that. And I might have to take a little bit of a break because my mouth starts to hurt, and this is going to be a lot of talking. This is a lot. Okay. So stages of development, we're going to dive right in. What is stages of development? This is a theory created by Erikson. Okay. And they are essentially consisted of a stage, an age, and what's called a crisis. And essentially this is kind of a theory that talks about throughout our whole lifespan. Basically, the whole goal of this theory is to explain how personality changes and evolves as a human. Okay, so because our personality isn't essentially the same when we're 3 years old versus when we're 30, right? So this kind of just shows the evolution of that personality development. So it is broken down into 8 stages total. They start at birth, they end at death. Okay, and how it's mapped out on the worksheet that I use is you have the age. Then you have the stage name, because every age is attached to a stage. And then you have what's called a crisis. A crisis is always in the form of a question. Okay. So it's essentially just a yes or no question, essentially. If those are met negatively, we're going to have some negative things happen. If that's met positively, we're going to have some positive things happen. Okay. So you have a stage, you have an age, you have a crisis, and then it's going to be met either positively or negatively. Okay. Just because one stage is gone, right? So for example, if we go to the first stage, which is age 0 to 1, 0 to 18 months ish is the argument. If we go back to that stage and we're now 25 and we say, oh, well, that stage is already passed, that stage can follow you. Okay. So once a stage has been completed, it can continue to follow you. Okay. So if you're 25, I believe, if I'm remembering right, if you're 25, you're already in stage number either 5 or 6. So you've got 5 stages that are continuing to follow you that can continue to pop off, okay, and cause problems in your life. The goal of this, number 1, is for me to educate people on what this looks like. And number 2, start meeting the needs that you need to meet that crisis positively now. Just because it's past doesn't mean you can't meet it now. So the whole goal is to get this all met now. I understand this is confusing, so I'm going to try and explain more as we go. So what I'm going to do with this video, we're just going to start with the first stage and kind of go through the lifespan. And hopefully some of the stuff I've said before will start to make sense, because the only way I can kind of show you how this works is just by kind of diving into it. Okay, so on the slides moving forward, I'm going to have the age, everything I just said, the age, the stage, the crisis, and the positive and negative outcome. Then at the top of the slide, I'm going to show you or kind of tell you what I do when I see this stage in individual therapy. Okay, so the stage is trust versus mistrust, and it goes from about birth to 1 year old or 18 months. Okay, if you look up Erikson's stages of development, the ages are going to be kind of different, because some people kind of argue that there's some leeway with some of those ages. Okay, so that's not like a set in stone. So trust versus mistrust, that is the name of the stage. The age is from birth to about 18 months. The crisis is the world predictable and supportive for myself? Okay, is the world supportive and predictable and supportive, however you want to say it? That is the question. So that's the crisis. Remember, I said the question or the crisis always comes in the form of a question. Okay, so to show this, I have an example that would happen in that age span of birth to 18 months, but then I also have an example of how that stage could follow you as you get older. Okay, so for example, if you bring a baby home from the hospital and you are changing them and you are feeding them and you are attentive to them when they cry, they start to learn that the world is predictable and supportive, because they learn that when I cry, I can predict that my needs are going to be met. Okay. If that is met positively, so you've met the crisis positively, what happens is hope, trust, and secure attachment style. So your attachment style starts way back when. I'm going to do a video on attachment styles after this one, so stay tuned. Okay, so if someone comes in my office and they have an insecure attachment style, I already know I'm going to have to dive into the stage of the development at some point. Okay, and I can typically tell what kind of attachment style somebody has within the first couple of visits, if not the first visit. Okay, when we do that video on attachment styles, you will also be able to see attachment styles in people around you very quickly after you have the information. Okay, so if you bring a baby home from the hospital and you're not very attentive to them, and we're not changing them and feeding them and giving them what they need, they learn that the world is not predictable and supportive, because they can predict that when they cry, they don't really know if their needs are going to be met. And they don't know if they're going to be met in a nurturing way. So what happens is they have mistrust, withdrawal, they withdraw from everybody, and then they have an insecure attachment style. Okay. This is why sometimes as you see kids with behavior issues, quote unquote behavior issues, it actually is stemming from this, because they've learned that the world is not predictable and supportive. So they don't trust people around them. They withdraw from people around them. And then they have an insecure attachment style. With your attachment style, if you have an insecure attachment style, which I will argue most people do, that's a whole thing within itself. Okay. So when I'm doing this in individual therapy and I identify an insecure attachment style, I actually pause and I do not go forward. Okay, I do not go forward until we start dismantling a little bit, or at least give education on the attachment style, because if not, it's going to get confusing. So stay tuned. I'm going to make a video for that. I'm hoping to have it posted very shortly after this one. So, because they do kind of go hand in hand. But you can start to see the world, predictable and supportive or not, okay? So let's say we give an example from, birth to 18 months. Now let's fast forward, right? Because remember I said this stage can follow you. So now let's say you're a teenager, okay? So now you're a teenager, and let's say you have the loss of a parent or a caregiver or a friend. Somebody has died, okay? The world is no longer predictable and supportive, okay? If the world is no longer predictable and supportive as a teenager, you're going to mistrust, you're going to withdraw, and your insecure attachment style, if you already had one, which I will argue most teenagers do, or most people do, it's going to get even worse. Your symptoms of that attachment style will get even worse and start growing even more. Okay? We cannot get away from death, but the goal is to get people to recognize the world can still be predictable and supportive even in the midst of death. So that's kind of one thing I do in individual therapy is help people with that. So as you can see, hopefully as you can see, just because this stage is labeled from birth to 18 months, it can follow you. And I will argue as a therapist, what I see is this stage actually follows people the most. People are grasping at straws in this society and in our reality to make things as predictable and supportive as possible. But what they're not understanding is it goes so much deeper than just trying to do that. Okay. A lot of the other skills in my videos, you will get to a point where things are predictable and supportive, but so many people just don't ever quite grasp that. So I will argue this is one I see follow people a lot of the time. Okay. So in individual therapy, now at the top of the slide, this is what I do to help people. Okay. When I find individuals struggling in this section, I identify boundary styles and attachment styles. Okay, I already mentioned that I identify their attachment style. I also identify their boundary style, because one of the ways that you change the attachment style is you have to change your boundaries. So I will do those two things first. If you are looking for a one-on-one session and you would like to dive more into your attachment style and your boundary style, by all means, contact me, book on my website, we can do that. However, I will put the boundary style in the attachment style video. I'm not going to do a lot on it because it's pretty basic. There's 3 different types of boundaries that I like to go over, but I'm really going to focus on that attachment style, and you'll kind of see how that comes together. So first things first, when I see this, I stop and I identify boundaries and attachment style, and then I'll do some work over the next couple of weeks with that client on what that attachment style means and how it's showing up in their life. And then I use the skills in my videos labeled 1 through 13 found on this same YouTube channel. So I'm doing CBT, I'm doing thinking errors, I'm doing core beliefs, I'm doing mindfulness within DBT. Like, I'm using all the skills that I've already taught you to kind of help dismantle that attachment style a little bit. Okay. And you'll see more how that ties in when I do my next video. But this is stage 1. Okay. So this is where it starts. Now we're going to kind of go through the lifespan a little bit further. So age 2 to 3, autonomy versus shame and doubt. Okay. The crisis. Can I be self-sufficient, or do I have to rely on other people? Okay. So let's use an example from age 2 to 3. And you can see it says the cup options example. So if let's say a 2.5-year-old is wanting some orange juice, okay, they want to drink. And the crisis is, can I be self-sufficient, or do I have to rely on other people? We want to teach kids that they can have some autonomy without criticizing them. Okay. So if a child says, I want to drink, and they say, I want it out of the blue cup, and you give them the orange cup, it's going to create a problem. Okay. Because they're learning that I can't be self-sufficient. I can't make that choice. Okay. I always use baking the egg example too. You can see baking in the egg. I like that example better than the cup example. Let's say your 2.5, 3-year-old is making cookies with you, and it's time to crack the eggs in the batter. As a parent, I don't know about you, but I'm just like, brace ourselves, right? Because we as parents and adults know if you get the shells in there, it's not a good day. Can they be removed? Yes, but it's not a great day. We really want to avoid that. But if you let if you're having a child bake with you and you let them do everything but the egg without explaining to them, number one, why, or just letting them try it, that can also cause a problem, because now I can't I can't rely on, or I have to rely on other people. I don't have the autonomy. I'm not self-sufficient. And I know it sounds crazy because they're so little. You're like, how can a person do that? Oh, they can. Okay. This is where the core beliefs kind of start to manifest, right? It's a script that essentially gets written over a lot of years. Okay. So I always tell people, let the kid break the egg. Just kind of explain to them what we're trying to do. What we're trying to avoid is getting the shells in there. So they can learn that I can be self-sufficient. I can get the help from other people, but I don't have to rely on other people. Does a 2 to 3-year-old have to rely on an adult? Yes, they do to survive. But there are little things that we can start giving to them to let them have the autonomy and build that confidence that I can do it, right? If a kid wants a drink and you pull out 3 different colors of cups and you're like, okay, pick what color cup you want, and you let them pick, they're self-sufficient. I got this. I got the confidence. Okay. You can see the positive outcome is coping skills, confidence, and a sense of independence. The negative outcome is compulsion, shame, impulsivity, doubt. Right. So now let's take a 2.5-year-old that wants a drink, and we don't ever let them pick the color of their cup, even though they want to pick the color of the cup. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to climb up on that table impulsively, and they're going to get what color they want. And then it's going to cause even bigger problem. Okay. Those are just very minor examples I use. If you want this more personalized to you, by all means, reach out to me. This is a little bit hard to teach because the personal examples are just that. They are so personal to each person. Okay. So some of the examples I use, you're like, how does that even make sense? How does this even formulate so young? It does. Okay. It's just, it hits home for people a lot more when they're able to come to therapy and give me a very personalized example. Okay. So now when I see this in individual therapy, I help identify their own personal strengths and weaknesses. I then use a variety of CBT, DBT, ACT techniques to kind of gain self-confidence and more independence. Okay. Is essentially what we do here. Because if the crisis is, can I be self-sufficient or do I have to rely on other people? I want to teach people that they can be self-sufficient. And again, if you've done my video on negative core beliefs, or if you've done any work on negative core beliefs, you already know one of the core beliefs that could come from this being met negatively is I'm not good enough. I can't succeed, right? Which we have to dismantle that and build up that confidence to dismantle that core belief and get this. I have coping skills. I can do this. Okay. So that's your second stage. Now let's go a little bit further. Initiative versus guilt, age 3 to 6. The crisis. Will I feel guilty for trying new things? Am I good or bad? Okay. So a child dressing themselves with the criticism and the teen exploring clothes example. Okay. So again, we've got our stage, we've got our age, we've got our crisis. If a child is age 7 or 5 and they go pick out their clothes, and 5-year-old, I'm going to use girls because I have 2 girls. When my kids were 5 years old and it was time to get dressed to go to the store, and if you're a parent, you probably know this, they don't really wear things that would be considered quote unquote appropriate. Okay. My oldest daughter loved to dress like Gwen from Spider-Verse, like the little pink and white Spider-Man. That was like her thing. Okay. We would go to the store dressed as Spider-Man all the time. Okay. If I was to have criticized her and say, that's not an appropriate thing to wear, guess what starts to happen? That child starts to inwardly feel guilty because they tried to explore something, and they can kind of start to think that they're a bad kid. So let the kid wear the damn Spider-Man costume. That is my advice to parents. Let them dress like the princess. Let them dress like Bob the Builder or Paw Patrol or whatever the latest and greatest cartoon is for kids, because it ties into this stage. Okay. If you don't criticize them and you're like, yep, you go out there, you be that Spider-Man. They have imagination. They learn to take positive risk, and they start to accept the rules a little bit, right? If not, lying, dependence, guilt. Okay. So for example, now let's go to the teenager. I cannot tell you how many times I see this. And I mean, this is a personal example. When my oldest daughter was a little bit younger teenager, 13, 14, I took her and some of her friends to the local skating rink here. And one of her friends was dressed, very conservatively. And we got to the skating rink, and she takes her jacket off, and she is, I mean, exposed, right? I mean, she's clearly not naked, but definitely was not dressed conservatively anymore. And I was kind of like, why did you cover up before? Oh, I didn't want my parents to know. See the lying? See, and now I'm depending on a jacket. I'm depending on a safety net because I don't want to expose myself around my parents because, right? I'll feel guilty if I try to explore this side of myself. I'll be a bad kid if mom sees me, and then I'm going to get criticized. Okay, see how it works? Okay, now the teen exploring clothes or makeup. Let's say a teenager is exploring with makeup. Okay, and let's say they come out in makeup that is maybe not blended correctly, or maybe is really over the top, right? Their eyeshadow is like really over the top. As a parent, if you criticize that, guess what happens to that child? They immediately feel guilty. They feel like they've done something wrong, and they can inwardly feel like, well, I'm a bad person. I'm not good enough. I can't succeed. It fuels the core belief system. So I hope that you're starting to see this fuels the core belief system. This is where the core belief system comes from. Okay. Again, if you have not watched my video on core beliefs, please do so, or it's going to be confusing. But this is where it comes from. Your entire equation will come from this. It will come from memories. It will come from things not being met, which leads me to what I didn't say in the first two stages. All of this, every single stage will boil down to what's called unmet needs. Period. Unmet needs. Okay, that's all it comes down to. So that is one of the things I help people do, is find what need is needing to be met as an adult, because you absolutely can meet them later in life. They don't have to keep lingering. Okay, so when I find individuals struggling in this section, I help them identify ways that they could start exploring something new. Okay, art, clubs, music, dating, leadership positions, etc., right? Because we're trying to meet the need of trying new things. So I really want to help people find, okay, what's a new thing that I can start trying? Okay, then I also use a variety of the same skills from my other videos to build self-confidence, using imaginations, showing them that there can be benefits in positive risk-taking. Right? If someone comes into my office and I know that this stage has not been met and they are a single person, I am going to work with them and use every skill that's already on my YouTube channel, plus what I've mentioned before about strengths and weaknesses. And I'm going to help them, find a way to build a dating profile, right? Like we're going to do CBT and raise awareness to thoughts and feelings in relation to the behavior of starting a dating app or a dating profile. Like, what does that look like? Okay, so I'm going to try and build them up for whatever it is, right? If there's an open mic night that they want to go to, but they're a little bit nervous to go alone because they're a single person, I am going to use previous skills to kind of get them in a spot where, look, there can be some benefits to positive risk taking, right? So that is kind of what I do in individual therapy. It's all about meeting that need, meet the need. Okay, now I'm going to go a little bit further, 7 to 12, industry versus inferiority. Okay. Crisis. How do I function in comparison to my peers? Am I worthless, or can I be successful? This is a big one for people. This is a really big one. This is where I see a lot of people get stuck. Okay. This one and trust versus mistrust, that very first one. Okay. How do I function in comparison to my peers? Well, if you have struggled with feeling like you haven't functioned in comparison to your peers, guess what your core belief is? I'm a failure, or I will fail, or I'm not enough. Okay. Am I worthless, or can I be successful? Well, if you have a core belief system that you are worthless, I will argue something has happened in this stage that is continuing to follow you. If your core belief is I am worthless is probably one of the number one core beliefs that I see. So I will argue most people have a problem in this section. Okay, so a child struggling in school example, and then teen or adult and college example. Okay, and again, I try to use examples, especially as we get older. I try to use examples that I see a lot in therapy. So if you are someone that has seen me and you're like, oh my gosh, that example sounds like me, where I got these examples probably has to do with the people that I see. Okay, because these are the ones I see on a continual basis, especially the older that we get, because the majority of people I see are I would argue 16 and above. Okay. So if you are listening to this and you're like, that example kind of sounds like an example I've taken to therapy. I've tried to modify them a little bit, but these are the examples that I see the most, especially moving forward. Okay. So a child struggling in school, let's say that a 11-year-old is in school, okay, 6th grade, we'll say, and they have a group of friends and they all get together and they do the same math test. And let's say all of the friends come back and they get an A minus, but the other child gets a C. How do I function in comparison to my peers? Well, what starts to happen? Because now that was met negatively, because now I feel like I don't function in comparison to others because they all got better grades. Now you feel inferior, you give up, and you resist that change that can happen through life. If it's positive, confidence, competence, productivity. So see how it can kind of sway the positive and or negative outcomes in people. Okay. Now let's do the teen or adult in college. I see this in individual therapy all the time. Okay. I practice in the state of Utah. Those of you that live in Utah, you understand the culture here. Those of you that do not live in Utah, you have probably heard about the religious culture here. We kind of have a culture here, and I feel like it's getting better, but we have a little bit of a culture here that the man goes to work and makes the money and the wife stays at home. There are a lot of stay-at-home moms here in Utah. Like I said, it is changing quite drastically, but that is kind of a cultural stance that we have here in Utah in relation to the predominant religion here. Again, I am not saying all moms. I am not bashing on stay-at-home moms. I am just saying that's kind of how the culture is here in a lot of aspects. Okay. So I have women come to therapy and they feel like they can't function in comparison to their peers because they don't have a college degree. Okay. I see this all the time because they don't have that college degree. So again, even though we're not in age 7 to 12, say now we're 35, 40, and we're coming to therapy and I'm struggling because I don't have a college degree. And now, right, like, well, I'm worthless. I don't have that degree. It's coming from this stage. It's because that need is not met. And now, because of that, I do feel beneath other people that have a degree. I resist change. I kind of just, give up, like, well, what do I do now? Right? Like, my kids are grown. Now what? What do I do? Okay. I see it all the time. So that's a big one. It's coming from this stage. When people are struggling in this stage, I help them track their progress versus comparing themselves. Because even if you've been a stay-at-home mom for 25 years and you don't have a college degree, there is so much that you are doing and that you have been doing that most of the time you don't even realize because you're too busy comparing yourself. Okay. I then use cognitive behavioral therapy skills to identify the thinking error. Typically, it's disqualifying the positive as the thinking error, while helping them acknowledge even the smallest of achievements that typically are pretty big achievements. They just feel like they're very small. But I help them gain that self-confidence, become more productive and understanding of their own levels of competency. Because I tell my clients all the time, just because you have a degree doesn't mean you're smart. And I have a bachelor's of science in social work, and I have a master of social work from 2 very accredited schools, Weber State University and Boise State University. I was part of the Honor Society at Weber State. I was part of a leadership and success program at Weber State. I graduated with a very high GPA from Boise State University. I have those achievements. I do not put my degrees on the wall in my office, and anybody that comes and sees me will tell you that will never happen. Okay. I'm probably one of the very few, even in the office that I work in, that I do not put my degrees anywhere. They're not even in my office. I have them hung up at home, but I do not display those for people because I understand getting a degree doesn't mean that you're smart. That doesn't mean anything. And I try to teach my clients, just because you have a degree, that doesn't mean you're competent. Okay. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. I know my achievements. I know my education. I don't need to justify that to anybody. If somebody asks, I'm more than welcome to prove it, but I don't necessarily need to justify that. Just like a stay-at-home mom doesn't need to justify why they've been a stay-at-home mom their whole life. You don't have to justify yourself to other people. Okay. You have to justify yourself to yourself and learn your own confidence and your own productivity and your own competence. Whether you have a degree and you use it, whether you have a degree and you don't use it, whether you're a stay-at-home mom, it doesn't matter what you do. So I really hone in on this section because this section is a big one for people, especially that 7 to 12. This is where people kind of start remembering a lot of memories, right? From birth to 18 months, you're not going to remember. Age 2 to 3 is like, oh, that's debatable, but I would argue that that memory is probably pretty fuzzy, right? 3 to 6, it's like, yeah, I could probably remember some things, but I mean, unless you've been through some major abuse, typically those memories are pretty positive. But then you get to 7 to 12 and you start getting around people and getting higher in that elementary age, go into that junior high age, things start to shift. So that's also why I have focused more time on this slide, because this is where I see things kind of start to slide off for people. Okay, so now we'll move on. The big one, the teenage years, 12 to 18, identity versus role confusion. Okay, you can tell just in the name, identity, who am I? Or am I going to confuse my role? Okay, if you haven't watched my videos on roles, go back and watch it. Okay, so identity versus role confusion, age 12 to 18. Where do I fit in society and what is my purpose? Okay, that is why it's called identity versus role confusion. Who am I? What's my identity? How many of us at 12 to 18 did not know who the hell we were? All right, raise your hand, because if you don't raise your hand, you're lying. Okay? And if you are in the age of 12 to 18, listen up. Okay, but if you are past that age and you feel like you knew who you were, wrong. Okay, wrong. Okay, teen and or adult, being helpful in conflict or comforting example. Okay, so let's say you have a group of friends and you're 17 years old and one of those friends is really going through it and you're trying to comfort that friend and they kind of push you away, but then the other 3 friends in your friend group, that friend is allowing them to comfort them, but they're kind of pushing you away. Where do you fit in now? Because my friend seems to be pushing me away, but she's letting the other 3 friends comfort her and I'm trying. Well, then where do I go? Who am I? Maybe I'm not really needed. Core belief. All right. There's the core belief. Right? When this happens, where do I fit in society? This is also why teenagers, you see a lot of different quote unquote groups, right? Like the jocks and the goths and the emo kids and the skateboard kids and the druggy kids and this and that, is because at this age, they're trying to figure out who they are. Okay. If it's not met positively, okay, withdrawal, role confusion, rebellion, feeling an identity crisis, okay, and it looks like I put the positive and the negative outcomes in the positive section. So your negative outcomes is withdrawal, role confusion, rebelling, and like feeling like just hopelessness, like you don't even know who you are, right? Like there is an identity crisis there. Met positively, confidence, happiness, positive self-image. Okay. If your friend is grieving and they're letting you comfort them, well, guess what? Now I've got the confidence that I can take that on. I'm happy. I've got this positive self-esteem. This is why a lot of parents get very on edge about who their kids hang out with, right? And why sometimes as parents, we tell our kids, I don't want you hanging out with that group of people. Because yes, while they're trying to find themselves and there should be a boundary of how do we let them find themselves, sometimes if they get in with the wrong crowd, guess what happens? They withdraw. Now they really don't know who they are. Okay. If they get with the right crowd, right, they've got that happiness and the confidence and that positive self-image. Who you surround yourself with at this age is very, very important. Okay. When I have individuals struggling in this section, I use videos 1 through 13 that are on my YouTube channel to more deeply explore beliefs and values in relation to memories that happened at this stage. I use the understanding roles videos, the drama triangle to maintain a sense of self and belonging, which ultimately will lead to that happiness and that higher self-esteem. So this essentially is going to be core belief systems that got manifested due to memories at this age. Right? I'm not good enough. I'm worthless. I can't succeed. On and on and on. That could have formulated from the memories from this stage. Okay. I will argue that I see more people struggle with the last stage, age 7 to 12, than I do this stage. I will argue that this stage is actually pretty easy in relation to some other ones to dismantle, especially when I'm working with people that are, in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, because this is so long ago and they understand and have the life experience. This one's pretty easy, so I don't spend a lot of time on it. People struggle more in age 7 to 12 than 12 to 18 from what I have personally seen as a therapist. Okay, so let's move on. Intimacy versus isolation, age 20 to 30, crisis. Can I become close to others while still maintaining my autonomy? So my independence. Okay, so marriage, family, or toxic relationship example. So if I get with somebody and they're pretty toxic, it's not working. If I get with someone and it's really toxic, it's not working, and you're trying to make it work, not only are you not getting your other crises met, right? Now you're left with isolation, loneliness, and you can kind of start to have some promiscuous behavior, aka cheating, is essentially where that comes from. Okay. Positive outcomes, companionship, love, partnership. I will tell you, age 20 to 30, this is typically where people start to get married. If your other previous stages were not met, right? How do I function in comparison to others? Am I good or bad? Am I successful or worthless? Is the world predictable and supportive? If those questions have not been met positively up to this point, age 20 to 30, and you go get married, it ain't gonna work. I mean, it could work, but it ain't gonna work very good. It's not gonna work as good as it could. Okay. And I don't know what the official stats on divorce is, but I can tell you it's a lot higher than what it was years ago. It's very, very high. People in the state of Utah tend to get married very young. A lot of people in Utah actually get married sometimes before this stage even hits. Okay. It's, again, the religious culture here is you get married young. A lot of people don't even make it to this stage before they're already married. Okay. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It can work. I'm just saying if those other stages aren't met and you go get married, things most likely are not going to end well. Okay. Or you're going to wake up one day 20 years later and say, what the hell has happened? Okay. I see it all the time. So if someone is struggling here, right, they've had a toxic relationship at this age, and it's still kind of haunting them. Those memories are kind of still sticking with them, right? And the core belief that could be formulated from this, again, I'm worthless. I'm not good enough. I'll never be good enough. I should have known better, right? It can start to create some of that. I, again, do the skills in video 1 through 13, dismantling the insecure attachment style that has come from these memories to pursue more healthy relationships. I help them get into a secure attachment style. I use the drama triangle and understanding roles to help teach them what a meaningful relationship actually is, of love, companionship, partnership, versus isolation, loneliness, promiscuous. I think everybody can either speak for themselves or somebody else that they've seen that's been in a relationship at this age. And it is a very lonely place to be. Even though they're with somebody, they're in a relationship, it's very lonely. Okay, because most of the time it's toxic. And what can happen, another thing that can happen is people get married thinking that that other person's going to fix everything or make them happy. You cannot be in a successful marriage unless you love yourself first. That's why this is, can I become close to somebody while still maintaining my autonomy, like who I am? And I have couples come into my office and I tell them, y'all got to stop doing everything together. First of all, like step number one, y'all got to stop doing everything together. What do you like to do separately? And I cannot tell you how many couples come in that have been married for 10, 15, 20 years, and they look at each other like, we just do everything together. What do you mean? What do we individually like? And I'm like, well, there's the problem right there. You've got to have some autonomy, right? You cannot do every waking thing together. Some people, I will argue that it works. I will argue that doesn't happen very often. And I will argue the people that it works for, those are very healthy people. Okay. Can it work? Yes. But I guarantee even someone like that, if I bring them into therapy and start peeling back the layers, I'm going to find what they like to do individually. Okay. So that is one of the things I help people with, is I just use all those previous skills to dismantle all of the memories and all of the core beliefs that have come from the memories in relation to this stage to have that healthy relationship. Okay, now we're getting a little bit later in life. 30 to 50, generativity versus stagnation. Okay, so age 30 to 50, the crisis. Have I been able to nurture the generation following me? Can I give love beyond myself? Okay, so raising your kids example, right? Typically, if you're age 30 to 50 and you've had kids in your 30s, you're probably in the thick of raising those kids. By 50, that is most likely calmed down quite a bit. So there's a lot going on in this stage. Okay. If it's met positively, you have feelings of accomplishment and satisfaction. The negative outcomes is midlife crisis, boredom, and you essentially can become very self-absorbed. Okay. So one of the things I see in relation to that raising children example is women that come in with the core belief, I'm a bad mom, or I've been a bad mom, or I did something wrong as a mom. Okay. I see it in dads too, but not like I do moms. If you have not had your other crises met, chances are this one also has not been met. And it's not that you were quote unquote a bad mom. Were there things that could have probably been better? Yes. But that does not mean that you get to formulate a core belief that you have been a bad mom because of the way that you raised your kids. Okay. That's not what that means. Can I give love beyond myself? Okay, so if the kids are now grown and they start leaving the house, well, how do I love beyond myself? Right? If you become self-absorbed with I was a bad mom and you reminisce on all the bad things or the shoulda, coulda, wouldas that you could have done as a parent, you will be faced with the midlife crisis, boredom, and self-absorption. If you can process the memories and process some of the things you feel like went wrong, you get feelings of accomplishment and satisfaction. So when I see people struggling in this section, I do a lot of self-reflection with them on their past, and I really try to get as many memories as I can from all of the previous stages. Okay, all the previous stages, we do everything that I've already talked about. I like to see people at this stage, if they're struggling, mentor somebody, right, at your local church, or do some volunteer work, do something where you are kind of giving your knowledge to the people in the generation previous to you, right, to build that satisfaction and that self-accomplishment. This is kind of a hard stage for me to teach. I personally am in this stage. I have no problem telling people my age. I'm 35. I'll be 36 in June, and this is 2026. So I will be 36 this year. So I am in this, and I am in the thick of raising kids. This is a harder stage for me to teach because I don't have all of the life experience from this stage because I'm not 50. Okay? So I don't have the other ones. I can teach all day long because I can give so many personal examples to my clients that are struggling that help them kind of see how this all comes together. This one's a little bit harder for me. Okay. So this is one that if I work with somebody that is age 45, I use as much life experience as possible to help make this make sense for them. And this is why I always say I learn just as much from my people as I hope they learn from me. Because when someone comes in that is older than me and they're kind of going through some of this, I learn so much more about how this stage works. Okay, so we're going to move on. I think the next one is the last stage. Yes, it is. Integrity versus despair. So age 50 to death. Okay, the crisis. Am I still useful to the world? How do I handle the end of my career and or the loss of people around me? So positive outcome is you're genuinely satisfied with your life. Negative is you essentially become preoccupied with those past decisions and failures, quote unquote failures in your life. I think we can all speak for somebody that we have known that kind of gets to their end of their life and they are just bitter, full of resentment, mean, angry. And it is because none of their stages were met positively. None of them. None of them were met positively. None of their memories were properly processed. And so now they're at the end of their life and they're not useful to the world. They didn't handle the end of their career well, and they don't know how to handle loss because nothing else was met, right? Because if you grow up and get to this age and you're still a failure and still not good enough, and you should have done something, and I've done something wrong, and I can't succeed, and I can't trust anyone, and on and on and on, yeah, you're going to be preoccupied with a lot of BS from life instead of processing that. Like I've always said, it doesn't matter what happens to people. It matters about what you do with it moving forward. Okay, so I have had clients in this stage. What I do when I find somebody in this stage, again, a lot of self-reflection through all of the previous stages, using a mix and a variety of different skills to help them with that, focusing on compassion and forgiveness rather than the mistakes. I focus on gratitude and radical acceptance within dialectical behavioral therapy to help them become more fulfilled with the life that they have lived, instead of focusing on what they could or couldn't have done. Okay, so this is a lot of reminiscing work through the previous stages. And I typically do that with everybody. We do go through the previous stages. We kind of have to, but especially in this stage, because that is where all of it is coming from. Okay. I know that this is a little bit of a confusing theory, but I hope you understood. So just a small summary. This is where your negative core beliefs are formulated from. They're formulated from the memories that happened throughout these stages. And they're essentially, it just comes down to an unmet need. Okay. I'm not going to do unmet needs in depth in this video. I can make a video on unmet needs and what that looks like in pertinence to the stages of development if people are looking for that. And now that I'm saying that out loud, it might be a good idea to just do that. I like to dive more into that in individual therapy because, like I said, the personalization that comes from that, I'm not going to get in a video. I'm simply just trying to give the education to show people how this works. So you have a stage, you have an age, you have a crisis that's always a question, and that is either met positively or negatively. Okay. And that is just in relation to memories. Okay, so that is the stages of development. That is where your equation comes from, is this. Okay, so if you want more, okay, reach out to me, email me. There's my email, utlcsw@gmail. My website, redefinetherapyandcoaching.com. I'm available I'm more than happy to give you the worksheet that I use for this or any additional information that you might need on this. Again, thank you for joining me. I know this was a long one, but I try to say it in all of my videos, truly thank you. Anybody that watches this, anybody that shares this, those of you that know me personally or have worked with me personally know this is my ultimate goal as a therapist, is to be able to get this information out there and teach larger groups of people. And the more that we share this, and the more that if you like this and this speaks to you, please share it with somebody. Please give me an email of somebody or a phone number of somebody that could really benefit from this, and I can personally reach out to that person. So again, truly thank you for joining me. I hope this was helpful. I know it's a lot, and stay tuned because I've got a few more videos coming your way. Thank you guys.